So for today's diary, I just wanted to do it in a visual way. I found that I was trying to write it down and it just didn't quite work. So just bear with my terrible illustrations, but hopefully it'll get the point across. So when I started working on Pedometer Plus's version 5 update, if you imagine, this is the box that is all of the features that are going to version 5. This is too big to work on all at once. And so inevitably what you do is you break it up into smaller and smaller pieces. Okay, well, here's 4 major tentpole features. And then for each of these, I'm going to start breaking them up into smaller and smaller features. And these are tasks that I can do, things that I can make, and kind of ways to think about working on this. So in the end, what I'm going to end up with is a bunch of sort of, which you would, I don't know, feature blocks, tasks, things that I can work on. And my overall goal, sort of as a developer, is if you sort of imagine that there's this sort of boundary between things that I'm still working on over here, and this is the sort of the done on this side, right? So I need to take these tasks from this side and put them over on the other side. That's functionally all that development is. So, I have this barrier that sits in between, and I need to move stuff across. So, in order for it to fit through, I need to break it down into something that's small enough that I can fit it. So if I just take a task that's this size, oh, that's great, it fit through, that's awesome. Awesome. But say I had a task that was this huge, big old thing. Obviously, this is too big to fit through the hole, so I need to make it into something smaller. So I'll break it up into 2 smaller tasks, and hopefully these 2 will be big enough. Oh, maybe there is still a bit too big, so maybe I'll break this one up even more, and hopefully you can kind of get a sense that this is the way my development process will work. And in general, this process works well. That I'll take something and then move it over. Take something over here and move it over, right? This is development. Great. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, what in particularly is complicated is what I find is that sometimes, rather than being able to break it into a smaller part, I'll find some task that is too big to fit through. This is too big. I could sit there and try all I want to get this through here, but it's just never going to go, right? It's stuck. But I can't break it down into something smaller. And this is rare. This isn't something that always kind of happens particularly commonly. But sometimes there's a task that doesn't really break down. And these tasks tend to take the form of something that requires a certain amount of kind of continuous mental effort to manage. And this happened to me in Pedometer++. Specifically, I was working on the workout features where I've built this sort of inside of this task, there's all of these little components that I've built as part of this over the course of the last 4 months, but none of them work together. They're all like these disparate things, and I need to essentially take all these parts and pull them together. And now, in order to do that, I need to have kind of hold this entire concept in my brain at one time and hold it there for, in this case, it turned out to be about 17, 19 hours-ish. So this is a tricky problem, because how do I get, from here to here if this block is just too big? And the way that I did this, and the way that I solved this problem, is with the concept that I learned from the Cortex podcast called the Greycation. It's essentially just a working retreat, whatever you want to call it. And essentially, this is where you go and have a specific period of time where you are focused entirely on work. And what that does, the reason this works, is it changes the size of what you can get done. Because now, suddenly, rather than having a regular, just a day gap to work with, now I have this much larger thing that I can fit content through. And for me, this worked. So in the way that I did this is I've done these where I go to a particular place. I leave my house, I go somewhere, I get it set up. For me in this case, it just logistically that didn't quite work. And so instead, I just had a day or 2 days where I said to my family, and we had agreed, my wife was totally on board, the kids knew, everyone kind of was on board with what was happening is I said, you know what? I am just going to work solidly all day, essentially. So I'm going to just wake up in the morning and I'm just going to work. I'll take a little break, maybe have some food, and then just immediately go back to work. And I'm just going to keep doing this until I get done. And I'll sleep at some point, maybe. Didn't sleep very much, actually. And then the next day, I'm just going to pick right back up where I was and work. Maybe have a little exercise just because I find that's helpful. And then go back to work. And this meant that kind of my working set, my RAM, if you will, in my brain, that I could keep going was entirely work focused. I didn't think about family stuff. I didn't think about personal stuff. I didn't think about anything, just work. And I could hold all of the various parts and the aspects of this problem that I was trying to solve, of putting together these disparate systems in a way that makes sense, in a way that was going to work, that I wasn't going to fall down on. And it worked. I was able to build it and do it. And so you might think, well, why don't you just do this all the time? And it's like, well, the reality of that is doing this kind of work is, as they say, is like sort of burning the candle at both ends, right? Like it's very difficult mentally. I think I was awake of a 48-hour period. I was working for, I don't even know what it was, 25 hours of it, something. I slept 6 hours in the middle and worked out for an hour and a half in between. And it's rough. Like it was difficult. If anything, it's rather than burning the candle on both ends, it's like lighting the candle completely on fire. It's not something that I can do very often. It's something I can do, but in this case, it worked. So I just wanted to mention it here as a tool for potentially someone else to find helpful. If you are finding yourself, when you're working through a task and you run into something that you can't break down smaller. These small guys are easy. Like they're very straightforward to deal with. But if you run into a task that just feels like it's too big to tackle at once, it's too small to subdivide anymore. That it's reached this atomic point where you just have to get it done. I recommend a Greycation. I recommend, talking to maybe some people in your family, for whatever your situation is, and say, I'm going to take a work retreat, and do this at home. If you work from home, you can do this in the office, whatever that looks like. You can go to a retreat center. You can get a co-working spot, whatever it is. But it's a great way of taking what is ordinarily, the productivity you can have in a particular day, and taking that and just changing the shape of it. It's a powerful tool. Don't overuse it, but sort of highly recommend it. In my case, it worked really well, and it made me accomplish something that I wouldn't have been able to accomplish otherwise in Pedometer++.